In 1932, Australia started a unique war that was not against any country or against any group, but it was a war against a bird called the emu, which had shown the stars to the Australian military during the day. It seems quite strange to hear that what kind of problem could anyone have with a bird to start a whole military operation against it? But Australia had taken such a step and failed miserably. After World War I, the whole world was going through the Great Depression, and Australia was also affected by it. Here, the farmers were not growing anything in their fields because the price of everything was so low due to the gap between demand and supply in the market that the farmers could not even cover their expenses. If this continues, Australia will not have anything left for its own food. To overcome this, the Australian government forced farmers to start wheat production and promised them that the government would buy wheat from them at good rates. The farmers agreed to the government's terms and started wheat production. But when the crops were ready, the government backtracked on its promise and started offering lower rates to the farmers. The farmers decided in protest that they would not sell the wheat anymore, and therefore they did not harvest the crops. Now, it was not that the Australian government did not need the wheat. They were blackmailing the farmers in a way because they knew that if the farmers did not sell the ready crop to the government, then their crop would be affected by insects. But what did the Australian government know that the coming trouble was going to be very painful? Emus, which are only found in Australia, were out of breeding season, and this was a serious problem. Because emus migrate after their breeding season, as emus migrated from inland areas to the coast, they found ripe wheat fields in Western Australia. A herd of 20,000 emus entered these wheat fields and started eating and destroying the fields overnight. 5.5 feet tall and weighing 45 kilograms, this bird can easily eat up to 2 kilograms of food in a day. Now, 20,000 emus is a huge number, and it used to destroy 20 to 25 acres of wheatland in just one day. For a couple of weeks, farmers tried to deal with them, but the emus kept moving from one field to another. So far, the crop of 300 to 150 acres of land had been lost. This problem was becoming serious now. When the government came to know about this, they immediately took action and started thinking to get rid of the emus. In their view, the only quick solution to this problem was a military operation. Yes, the Australian government asked the military to launch an operation against the emus. It was a very strange operation that the media called the Great Emu War. Australian military that had recently been through World War I. They felt that when they defeated their real enemies. So what are these emus in front of them? They sent a few soldiers to Western Australia with machine guns and a few thousand rounds. But by the time the operation started, the rains had started in Western Australia. Due to heavy rains, the herds of emus spread over a large area which became difficult to target. In view of this problem, the attack on emus was postponed for a month. On November 2, 1932, soldiers received a report that a few emus had been seen in a village called Campions. By the time the soldiers reached there, the locals pelted stones to collect the emus, but instead of gathering in one place, they were scattered. Let me tell you here that emus have very strong legs and can run at an amazing speed of 70 km/h. The soldiers opened fire on emus in the same situation. A total of only 5 to 7 emus were killed in this attack, and the rest disappeared in the fields. The first attack failed miserably, killing only 5 to 7 emus out of 20,000, the first failure of this military operation. After 2 or 4 days, the soldiers decided that they would now sit in ambush in the fields, wait for the emus to approach, and then open fire. This time around, 1,000 emus entered the fields and opened fire as they approached the hidden soldiers. But this time, luck did not favor them. The machine gun jammed just after 24 emus had died. Before the machine gun could be fixed, all the emus disappeared back into the fields. The second attack of the military operation, and that too an embarrassing failure. Now, for the third attack, the soldiers decided to move south from Campion, where there were more emus. If the soldiers were to find any success, it could be found here. But this time, the soldiers noticed something very interesting in emus. The soldiers noticed that the emus were divided into separate groups, and each group had a leader who was somehow looking after them. The rest of the emus would be busy eating the wheat fields, but the leader would keep his eyes on the impending danger, and as soon as the soldiers were about to come, the leader would drive away the groups of all the emus. Now the soldiers were tired of chasing them, and they were finding it difficult to fight against the emus. As in wars, when the enemy is not being controlled in one way, strategy has to be changed, and the Australian military also decided to change its strategy. Now they planned to install a machine gun behind a vehicle, quickly penetrate a herd of emus, and then fire at the fleeing emus from the moving vehicle. But as they were thinking, it might happen in a real war. But here the enemy was definitely a flightless but very clever bird. Because the vehicle had to run on rough fields, it was obviously difficult for the machine gun operator to target the running emus, because after firing several rounds, 1 or 2 bullets hit the right target. Well, the soldiers adopted this strategy, but due to speeding in the off-road, a fleeing emu got stuck in the steering of the vehicle, due to which the vehicle crashed into the bushes. In this attempt, 2,500 rounds were fired, and only 200 emus were killed. The fourth attack and the new strategy had also failed. The operation was stopped for a short time, and after a few weeks, the operation was resumed. And this time, the attack was a little more successful. In total, the soldiers managed to kill around 1,000 emus, but after firing a total of 10,000 rounds. This means that 10 shots were fired to kill 1 emu. When the issue was raised in the Australian Parliament, politicians objected to the performance of the military. Politicians said that if any medal is to be given for this performance, it should be given to Emus, who deftly dodged 9 out of 10 bullets. Even after spending so much, only 1,000 emus out of 20,000 were killed. During this period, about $10,000 were spent on this operation, which is more than $100,000 today. It was a very embarrassing defeat for the Australian military. The military operation was called off, meaning that Emus had won the war. As time passed, the population of emus increased, and every year the farmers were suffering huge losses. This time, the Australian government came up with a new strategy. They distributed thousands of weapons to farmers and introduced a bounty system. That is, the farmer who kills more emus will be given a bounty, means money. This method worked, and 2 years later, in 1934, 57,000 bounties were claimed in 6 months. When this news went on, the international media, animal rights organizations raised a lot of noise. People began to criticize the Australian government. What would the Australian government do? They also had to stop this bounty system. Today, the population of emus in Australia is around 6 to 7 million. And farmers now put up fences around their fields to keep wild animals out, which is now a common practice in Australia. Of course, now farmers are not so much threatened by wild animals in Australia, but this war against the emus will always be remembered in history. Hope you like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more interesting videos.